All right, friends, this thing is getting out of hand. This is part 2. We've got a lot of stuff to add in, a couple of things to clean up from the first version. The first thing we want to deal with is this red circle here that is the diatonic minor triads for each of the keys. We adjusted it a little bit, shifted some of the numbers over to be a little bit clearer. Probably the way that you guys ended up using it, it is going to work better with this as opposed to the way that we intended originally. So this one right here, if you use the red circle, that one, if you line it up with the F, then all of the rest of those will be in the right place. So your G half diminished will be your 2 chord, and then your 5 chord would be the C7, and then the rest of the numbers are going to go around this direction as opposed to the way that we had it set up originally. It's the difference between relative minors and parallel minors, but none of that is stuff that you need to really worry about. Just know that if you download it now, the red circle will be shifted to the way that you're most likely going to try to use that red circle. Okay, now let's let this thing expand. Like we said, this thing is just infinitely large. The longer you look into the circle of fifths, the more patterns you find and the more tools you find inside of it. So there's this thing. A lot of my students who play piano also play instruments in band if they're younger. If they're older, they play in a band, but they don't play in school band. So school band instruments, you get a saxophone, you get a trumpet, whatever, a clarinet. They tell you need to play this thing for however many years. And the problem is, now this is going to sound insane to you, or you're going to be like, yeah, of course, everybody knows this. If you get, let's say, an alto saxophone and you learn where a C is, put that middle finger down and you've got a C. You got a C up on the music. You see the C, you play the C. That note is not a C. So, alto saxophone is called an E-flat instrument. Again, this is either like totally review for you, or this is going to just rock your world. A C on the saxophone is not the same as a C on the piano. Now, we want to get a little bit philosophical about this. All of the letters on the instruments are made up anyways. If you're learning in other countries, then of course you're not using the English alphabet probably, or you're not using an alphabet at all. You might be using a solfege or some other system. So the letters are kind of arbitrary, but the fact that we would call this on the alto saxophone a C, and we would also call this a C, and they don't line up, that's kind of frustrating. But the fact that the alto saxophone is an E-flat instrument means that when they play a C, it's actually going to come out an E-flat. So, an alto saxophone playing C comes out as an E-flat. Now, the reasons why this is set up this way, there is its own video, its own workshop. There are some good reasons. It seems to cause a lot of frustration among, of course, anyone who's playing a band instrument, and you got to learn this whole other system of transposition stuff. I will say that playing the saxophone, it's kind of convenient that if I want to play a C on the alto saxophone, if I move to a different instrument that has the same fingering, even though it's like a longer tube, let's say it's like a tenor saxophone, it's the same instrument pretty much, but it's just a little bit longer. Well, if I use that fingering on that longer instrument, it's going to create a lower sound. It's no longer even going to be a C or an E flat. It's going to be something else entirely. So the fact that I can use the same fingerings and call them the same thing is kind of convenient when I'm moving between instruments. It's still understandably frustrating, though, for someone who's just playing one band instrument and they just want to be able to play in the same key as whoever's playing the piano. Anyone who has played the guitar for a long time and also tried to move over to the ukulele has run into this before, where, for example, on guitar, you try to finger like a D chord. Well, you go to the ukulele and the relationships between the strings are all the same, but the notes are different. Again, maybe this isn't interesting to you, but for those of you who are playing guitar, know that if you're playing a D chord and you take that to your ukulele, you play the exact same fingering. That's also going to be a chord, but now it's going to be a G chord. And that's weird because you spent all these years knowing this shape is a D, that's a D, that's a D, that's a D, that's a D. and then now you see a D on the paper, and you're on a ukulele, and you go to play a D, except it's not a D, it's a G. It's kind of frustrating, and it kind of breaks your brain a little bit to try to make that adjustment. So it is super convenient that we have fingerings that you can just use over multiple instruments. But it still creates a major problem between people in the band trying to figure out, all right, so if I'm playing in the key of E and you're a B flat instrument, what key are you supposed to play? Well, B is a whole step away, so I think it's either a G flat or a D. I'm not sure. Or maybe I'm in G. I don't know what key I don't know what key you're supposed to be in. You worry about it. Figure it out. We're going to play the song. That's what usually ends up happening. So band leaders actually have to be really good at this, knowing, all right, so if it's in this key, then you have to play this note, and you have to play this note, and you have to play this note, and tell everybody the different letters they're supposed to play to get the same stupid sound. So there's some serious mental calculations going on there that you don't even realize. They're just calling out, oh yeah, you play this, you play this, you play this. And in their mind, they're doing all these crazy transpositions that the rest of us can't even usually do one time through. And the reason we're discussing that here is, you got it, the circle of fifths can help. So this thing right here will tell you what note you're supposed to play, or what note different instruments are supposed to play. We call this thing, the piano, a concert instrument, as is a violin and a guitar, and lots of other instruments, which means that when we play this note, C, it's an actual real C. A real C, as if there is such a thing. So this is kind of the standard by which we judge all the rest of the instruments. It's actually off of A, which is supposed to be 440, and that's a tuning discussion that, again, is a whole other video. But so this is a concert instrument, which means it's the real notes. So we use the word concert to mean basically the piano. So if you are playing a concert C, a C on the piano, then all of the F instruments are supposed to play a G. That would be horn, French horn, English horn. A G instrument would be playing an F. And so then a B flat clarinet, a trumpet, a tenor sax, a soprano sax, those would be playing a D. That's what this blue circle here is going to be for. You can turn that one around and then adjust it to be whatever note you want it to be. So the band leader would say, all right, piano, you play a C. French horns, you play a G. B flat clarinets, you're going to play a D. E flat alto saxes, you're going to play an A. They're all going to play their instrument. 1, 2, 3, go. And it's all going to come out sounding like that. Again, for a lot of you, the older students who aren't in band, in school band, or aren't playing other instruments, then this is not going to be as relevant. But for a lot of you, that thing is going to save a whole lot of heartache and mental strain. Now, I've included one little bit here that doesn't really have anything to do with the circle of fifths, but it is a thing that has stumped some of the best pianists I know, who got stuck in a band situation and just couldn't figure this out for the life of them. It's going to seem idiotic until one day you're trying to figure it out, and it's just one of those things that for some reason never ever clicks in anyone's brain, really. So we say that alto saxophone, for example, is an E flat instrument. So in the place of X here, you're going to put the name of the letter of the instrument. So an E flat instrument. When an E flat instrument plays a C, it is a concert E flat. That sentence right there is going to save a lot of people a lot of heartache. And for a lot of you, you're like, okay, why is that so hard to remember? It just is. For some reason, the human brain doesn't want to hold this one sentence. So whatever the instrument is, if it's a B flat instrument, then when a B flat instrument plays a C, it's a concert B flat. Okay, well, you're likely not going to remember that, even though it seems simple and you think that you will. It's written on your circle of fifths for you. And now it's time to talk about the older students who are in a band, not band. For all of you who are dealing with guitarists, we now have all of the capo settings for all of the different keys. A capo? What? So capo settings are going to be very similar to this whole band instrument weirdness for those of you not familiar with guitar or capos, the idea is you can play for example, that same D chord we were talking about before. If you want to play that D shape and you want to think of a D, but you actually want to play a note that's slightly higher than a D, like you want to play, let's say you want to play an E flat chord. Well, playing an E flat chord on the guitar is a really hard, weird shape that hurts the hand a lot. So what a lot of guitarists will do is they'll just play a D chord, but then they'll use the capo to make all the strings sound 1/2 step higher. So it looks to the hand, and when you're looking at the guitar, look at the guitarist, it looks like they're playing a D, but because they have the capo on, it's actually coming out as an E flat. So in a lot of circles, the capo is kind of seen as like a cheater tool to avoid having to play really difficult chords. That's not really the case. There's lots of legitimate uses for a capo, but it can also be used as a cheater tool for guitarists who don't want to learn how to play a lot of chords well. So anyway, the capo is a really common thing among guitarists, but then they have the same question that all of the band instruments have, and that is, all right, so if you're playing in the key of E flat and I want to play in the key of G, what capo do I need to have it on, or what fret do I need to put the capo on? And that question, whatever that reason is of that other band instrument thing, where like the brain just kind of breaks and doesn't want to hold that sentence, we got the same thing going on with the capos. So what we can do is we can say, well, the rest of the band is in the key of, and then set that to whatever you want using the gray circle. That's where the rest of the band is. There we go. And so if you wanted to play in, let's say the rest of the band is in the key of C. Well, you could play in the key of G then, as long as you put the capo on 5, on the 5th fret. Or you could play in the key of D, as long as you put the capo on the 10th fret. I will say that the higher the number's only going to go up to 12 frets. The higher the number, the more ukulele-ish and the weirder the guitar is going to sound. So in general, you want to keep the capo number as low as possible. So if you're giving these instructions to the guitarist in your band or whatever, then you want to try to find a key that's easy for them to play in. That's usually going to be the word caged, C-A-G-E-D. One of those keys is going to be the easiest for them to play in. But then you also want to keep that capo number as low as possible. Like a 1 or a 2 or a 3 would be really great. Anything above 5, 6, or 7, that's going to start to sound a little bit weird. Now, if you want that weird ukulele-ish sound, then cool. Then even if it's in an easy key, you can just give them a really high capo number and have them play in a different key, so you can kind of get that effect. But just know that the higher the number of the capo, the weirder and higher up the sound is going to be. It's not going to really sound like a full big guitar. And now the last piece that we have on this for now, until part 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and a trillion on the circle of fifths, is all of the modes. If you've never heard of modes before, you're definitely not going to care now. We have an entire workshop just on modes and how to use them and why to use them and whatnot. But this is just if you're already into modes, but you have a hard time. So if I'm playing E flat Phrygian, that's the same as what major key? All of that stuff can be answered here with the same logic as all the rest of them. So Ionian is the same thing as major. So you just set the Ionian setting to be whatever that would be, this one right here. You set that to whatever letter you want it to be, and then right here it's set to the key of C. So C Ionian is the same thing as G Mixolydian, which is the same thing as D Dorian, and then you can just move that circle around however you want to make those settings appropriate for the keys you're trying to figure out. I also included here some of the directions for these modes because I know it's just really hard to remember. So, for example, Mixolydian is the same thing as a major key but with a flat 7. So let me show you that real quick. Again, this isn't the modes workshop, but just to show you what the instructions on this particular tool mean, this is the key of C. This is the key of G. Those are almost the same. If you play the key of G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1. If you take that 7th note in the key of G and you flat it, you lower it, then you have G major with a lowered 7, and G major with a flat 7 is G mixolydian. That's the definition of mixolydian. So you've got the definition of each of the modes here, and then how they all relate to each other. That's part 2 of the Circle of Fifths, and of course, send us your comments, your questions, your complaints, and we'll make part 3 even better than part 2. Let's keep going. Good luck. Have fun.